My name is Emily Parker. I'm 32 years old and, for the last 10 years, I've worked as a patrol officer with the Seattle Police Department. People always expect my story to be one of law, order, and routine heroics, but sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought at home. The day my father's will was read, rain streaked down the windows of the downtown Seattle law office. I remember sitting perfectly upright, dressed in my pressed uniform trousers and a navy blue sweater, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. I thought about my mom, who passed away when I was just 12. She was the architect of our little house by the Pacific, a place full of driftwood sculptures, sea glass vases, and watercolors painted right on the walls. She designed it for us, and for years, that house was my world. But all that changed when Dad married Linda. Linda was a force of nature, always in designer shoes, always talking about her daughter Madison's potential. Dad loved her in a way I never understood, and I tried, for years, to see her as family. That morning, my stepmother Linda arrived at the law office in a tailored red coat, perfectly blow-dried hair, and the icy composure of someone who knows she's about to win. My stepsister Madison barely glanced up from her phone, legs draped over the arm of the waiting room chair, scrolling through something more interesting than her family's future. When the attorney called us in, Linda shot me a look, a tight little smirk that said everything without a word. We sat around a massive walnut table, Seattle's skyline glinting through grey mist outside. I folded my hands in my lap, like the good daughter I'd been trained to be. The attorney, Mr. Harris, began reading the will in a slow, measured tone. I waited for the words, "The house on Whidbey Island, designed by the deceased's first wife, shall go to his beloved daughter, Emily Parker." But instead, Harris droned, "The Whidbey Island property shall be transferred to Madison King, stepdaughter of the deceased." I felt the air leave my lungs. Madison? The same stepsister who'd only visited the house twice since Dad remarried, who called it that old beach shack here and complained about the lack of Wi-Fi. My mom's masterpiece, the place I'd spent every summer since I could walk, was going to someone who barely cared enough to visit. Linda's smile widened as the will went on. The security company, Parker and Associates, shall be inherited in equal shares by my wife, Linda King, and her daughter, Madison King. That was the family business. The company I'd been quietly managing for 3 years, the business Dad built from a one-man patrol to the biggest private security firm in Seattle. I'd worked weekends, nights, pulled double shifts, and took on every role from dispatcher to HR to field training. And now, in one sentence, it was gone. The bank accounts, the investments, the vintage cameras Dad and I used to collect, every last thing went to Linda. I sat in stunned silence, listening as everything that mattered, my home, my future, my memories, was handed to the woman who'd spent years making sure I never truly belonged. When it was over, Linda leaned across the table. "Well, Emily," she said, her voice sweet as honey, "dreams don't always come true, do they, darling?" The attorney cleared his throat awkwardly, shuffling papers. I swallowed hard and forced myself not to look away. "Is there a mistake?" I asked, voice almost a whisper. "No mistake," Linda said, still smiling. "Your father was very clear. He wanted his real family to be taken care of." Her words hit like a punch. Real family. Like the 18 years I spent as his only child didn't count. Like the nights I stayed up nursing him through chemo, or the hours I logged keeping the business afloat when he was too tired to manage, meant nothing. Like the girl who organized his funeral while Linda claimed she was too overcome with grief was just invisible. For a moment, the anger and the grief tangled together inside me. I'd spent years trying to win Linda's approval, biting my tongue through her passive-aggressive remarks, enduring family holidays where I was the odd one out. But as I looked around the room, it hit me. I'd lost the battle, but I wasn't a child anymore. Linda didn't know who I'd become. She thought I was still the scared little girl she could steamroll. She had no idea I'd spent a decade enforcing the law, holding my ground with suspects twice my size, learning to think 3 steps ahead. She didn't know I'd survived worse than this, on the street and in my own home. I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and said quietly, "A thank you for your time, Mr. Harris." Then I walked out, rain pounding the city streets, with nothing but my pride and a promise to myself. This wasn't the end of my story. Linda had made one critical mistake. She underestimated me. I walked through downtown Seattle, feeling the cold drizzle soak through my jacket, the city humming with indifference around me. I'd always loved this city, its stubborn clouds, the way the ferries cut across the Sound, the neon of Pike Place. It was my home, and yet, after the reading of the will, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Linda thought she'd broken me for good, that I'd slink away quietly, let her and Madison run my father's business into the ground, and fade out of the story. She thought I was still that teenager desperate for approval, still that girl who'd gone silent when Madison snickered about my hammer-down shoes or when Linda changed the family Christmas plans without telling me. But people change. The uniform I wore every day taught me that resilience isn't just about surviving pain, it's about learning from it, using it, letting it make you stronger. I'd survived harder things on the job, walking into chaos, seeing the worst of people, standing up for what was right even when it was unpopular. I was not the scared little girl Linda remembered. As I walked, I called the one person who'd always believed in me, even when I doubted myself, Karen Evans, my mentor from the FBI Academy. She picked up on the second ring, her voice as crisp and no-nonsense as ever. "Emily, you all right?" I nearly lost it then, just hearing genuine concern. "Karen, I need a fresh start. Maybe even a new city." "What happened?" "My father's business. He left it to Linda and Madison." I got nothing. She didn't ask if I was sure, didn't try to soften the blow. She just said, "When can you start?" That was all it took. Within 2 weeks, I packed up my tiny apartment, mostly uniforms, law books, and a battered box of Mom's old watercolors, and moved into a sublet in Manhattan. Karen's consulting agency specialized in high-stakes crisis management for Fortune 500 companies. She needed someone with real-life street smarts and grit, not just degrees and soft skills. I dove in, using everything I'd learned from years of patrol, investigation, and running security teams back in Seattle. Gone were the days of chasing shoplifters and breaking up our fights. Now I was learning how to read financial statements, map out hostile takeovers, and spot weaknesses in corporations the way I once spotted lies in suspects' faces. I became a ghost, working 18-hour days, barely sleeping, living on coffee and bagels from the corner deli. Every time the ache from my old life surfaced, I buried it deeper under work. The truth was, I missed Seattle with every fiber of my being. I missed Dad's office, with its cluttered desk and the faded photos of the two of us on security jobs. I missed the lake house, my house, in my heart, even if the will said otherwise. But I was learning something new, that you can build a whole new life from scratch, if you have to. Karen noticed the change in me. One evening, as we finished a late-night call reviewing a corporate security plan, she said, "You're getting tougher, Maybe even a little ruthless. I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound I barely recognized. Guess it's time I started fighting for myself. Those first 2 years in New York went by in a blur. I didn't call Linda, and she didn't call me. Word got back to me through old family friends that Parker and Associates was struggling. Turns out, losing the person who'd managed half the company's clients and all the logistics mattered more than Linda wanted to admit. Madison, fresh out of college, was in way over her head. I heard the whispers: unpaid contractors, lost accounts, high staff turnover. The lake house, which Madison supposedly owned, was mostly empty. She preferred her apartment in downtown Seattle and only visited for Instagram photoshoots. Linda started taking out loans against Dad's life insurance payout to keep the business afloat. I took note of every detail, but I didn't reach out. Not yet. I was too busy becoming someone they would never expect. Someone they couldn't control or erase. But you can't escape your past forever. One November evening, my phone buzzed with a number I barely recognized. For a second, I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me answer. Emily? It's Madison. Her voice was small, nothing like the confident, dismissive girl I remembered. This is unexpected, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I know we haven't talked, but I need your help. There was a long pause, and then she blurted, the business is falling apart. Linda doesn't know what to do, and I'm still finishing school. We might lose everything. Please. I know you're mad about the will, but Dad wouldn't want the company to go under. You know that. I closed my eyes, old memories fighting with the present. Dad's legacy, the company he built from the ground up, was on the brink of collapse. I should have felt grief, but instead I felt something sharper, a sense of opportunity. Send me the financials, I said. Within an hour, an email hit my inbox, and what I saw was worse than I'd expected. The company was bleeding money, had lost its best clients, and was one lawsuit away from bankruptcy. It was time for me to decide what kind of legacy I wanted to build, not just for Dad, but for myself. I spent that whole night poring over spreadsheets and contracts in my tiny New York apartment, the city's glow filtering through the blinds. The numbers painted a brutal picture: 3 major contracts lost, cash flow hemorrhaging, overdue payments piling up, and only a handful of loyal employees left from the once mighty Parker and Associates. Dad's firm was a shadow of what it had been. And yet, as I scrolled through the disaster, I felt my old instincts kick in. I didn't see a lost cause. I saw a challenge. After a week of digging, mapping out solutions, and running the numbers over and over, I was ready. I called Madison back. She sounded exhausted, and for the first time in our lives, her voice didn't have that edge of easy confidence. I have a solution, I said, cutting right to the chase. But you're not going to like it. We agreed to meet at a little coffee shop near her university. I flew out to Seattle, the city looking both familiar and distant as I landed. The moment I walked into the cafe, I saw how much Madison had changed: shadows under her eyes, the bravado gone, her hands fidgeting with a cold coffee cup. I can save the company, I told her without sugarcoating anything. I have capital, contacts, and the expertise. But this isn't charity. I want controlling interest, 60%. Her eyes widened in shock. 60? Emily, I don't think Linda will ever agree. She doesn't really have a choice, I said, gentle but firm. Either you sell to me, or you watch Dad's legacy vanish. Those are your options. I handed her a folder with my offer. I'd given the company a fair, almost generous, valuation, given its dire situation. Madison and Linder could keep 40% between them, stay on as consultants if they wanted, and maybe recover some dignity. But I would run the show. Madison stared at the papers for a long time. I have to talk to Linder, as she said quietly. You have 48 hours, I replied, knowing they'd run out of alternatives. I spent the next day wandering around my old city, letting nostalgia and worry wash over me in waves. Seattle was still beautiful, the ferries cutting through the water, the Pike Place market bustling even in the rain. But everywhere I went, memories tugged at me, Dad's laugh echoing down the waterfront, Mom's soft voice as she pointed out the colors of the sky at sunset, my own teenage self dreaming of making a difference. The call came the next afternoon. Linder's voice was sharp as broken glass. You manipulative little. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? Actually, no, I said honestly. My plan was to live my life far away from all of this. But you forced my hand when you let Dad's company fall apart. We're not selling, as she snapped. Then you're bankrupt. The lawsuit alone will wipe you out. There's no miracle coming, Linder. Silence. I could almost hear her calculations over the line. 51%, she said finally, as if bargaining with the IRS. 60, I said. 55 is my absolute minimum. Linder's pride warred with her fear, but reality was a stubborn thing. In the end, it wasn't about me versus her, it was about survival. They needed me more than I needed the company. The deal was signed on a Thursday morning in November, exactly 3 years to the day since Dad's funeral. I walked into the old conference room, once Dad's favorite place, now heavy with tension, where Linder and Madison sat with their attorney. I took Dad's old seat at the head of the table. Linder stared at me with fury she barely tried to hide, but Madison just looked tired and, for the first time, a little grateful. The signing took less than an hour. When it was done, Linder rose from her chair, her expression set like stone. You think you've won, as she hissed. I looked at her, remembering every slight, every cruel remark, every lonely night as a child. Linder, I stopped caring about winning the day you told a 12-year-old girl that her mother wasn't special. I care about surviving. And now I care about honoring my father's memory by making sure his work doesn't die just because you were too proud to ask for help. She didn't answer. Madison looked at me with a kind of hope I hadn't seen in years. I stood up, smoothing my jacket, feeling more like myself than I had in a long time. But since you brought it up, Linder, yes, I did win. I won the moment I realized I didn't need your approval to become who I am. I turned to Madison. See you Monday morning. We have a company to rebuild. As I walked out, Linder called after me. Your father would be ashamed of you. I paused at the door, a surge of old pain threatening to rise. Then I thought of the employees whose jobs I'd save, the clients calling me all ready to say they'd return now that I was back, and the dream Mom and Dad had for the company, something lasting, something good. I didn't turn around. Maybe, I said softly, but my mother would be proud. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Monday morning came with grey skies and a thin mist over the Seattle skyline, the kind of weather that had always made me feel more at home than any sunny day. I stood in front of the Parker and Associates building, its brick facade looking tired and a little neglected, but still holding the echoes of all the years Dad and I had spent inside. I took a deep breath and walked in, greeted by the familiar scent of old coffee and copia toner. Some of the employees looked surprised to see me. Others, those who remembered the old days, smiled with genuine relief. The first thing I did was call a staff meeting. In the old conference room, I stood at the head of the table, just like Dad used to, but this time, the chair was mine for real. Madison took a seat at the far end, notebook in hand, looking nervous but determined. Linda didn't show up. She'd made it clear she wanted as little to do with me as possible. I looked at the small team gathered before me, security guards, dispatchers, a couple of senior managers who'd weathered every storm. Some of them had been with Dad since the beginning. Their faces were tired but hopeful, desperate for something to believe in again. I know the last few years have been hard, I began. I won't pretend I can fix everything overnight. But I can promise you this, I will fight for this company the way my dad did. I know what it means to all of you, and to me. There was a long silence. Then, as if on cue, Mr. Reed, our oldest dispatcher, cleared his throat and spoke up. Glad to have you back, Emily. Place hasn't felt right since you left. I nodded, swallowing the emotion in my throat. Let's get to work. We spent the next weeks untangling the mess left behind. Contracts needed renegotiating, debts needed settling, and trust needed rebuilding, most of all. Madison worked beside me, asking questions, taking notes, and slowly proving she was willing to learn. At first, the other employees kept their distance from her, but over time, her persistence started to win them over. I moved into Dad's old office, cleaned out years of files, and found a faded watercolor Mom had painted, a view of the Pacific Ocean from the porch of the Whidbey Island house. I hung it behind my desk as a reminder of why I was here. The first major victory came sooner than I expected. One of our oldest clients, a chain of hospitals in Tacoma, called to say they'd heard I was back. They wanted to renew their security contract, but only if I took the lead on operations. I agreed immediately, pouring myself into the project, working late into the night. The job brought back memories, long hours driving with Dad from site to site, discussing every detail of security plans, telling me, it's never just about locks and cameras, It's about people trusting you to protect what matters most. Those words became my motto. Madison surprised me by coming in early every day, staying late, and volunteering for projects nobody wanted. She took on the job of organizing employee schedules, a task Linda had always avoided, and did it with a precision that impressed even the skeptics. Gradually, I began to see flashes of someone new in her, someone less entitled, more humble, more determined to earn her place. 6 months passed in a blur. The company stopped losing money. New clients arrived, old ones returned. I hired back every employee Linda had laid off, plus a few more, grateful to see the family Dad had built coming home again. One afternoon, as I watched Madison teaching a new recruit how to handle scheduling software, I realized something had shifted. She was smiling, really smiling, not just posing for a photo. For the first time, it looked like she belonged. Later that week, she knocked on my office door, a nervous look in her eyes. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course. What's up? She hesitated, glancing at the watercolor behind me. Do you ever miss the house? I looked at her, surprised by the question. Every day. It was the only place that ever really felt like mine. Madison nodded, her expression serious. I never really understood what it meant to you. I thought it was just another old building. I was wrong. I didn't know what to say. In that moment, the years of resentment and misunderstanding between us seemed to shrink, replaced by something almost like forgiveness. I know it's yours by law, Maddie. But it'll always be my mother's home, I said quietly. She looked at me for a long time, and then nodded. I get that now. Business wasn't just business anymore. For the first time, it felt like the Parker legacy was something worth fighting for, not just for Dad, not just for me, but for everyone who had been a part of it. That spring, we won a contract to provide security for the grand opening of a new arts centre downtown, the biggest project in company history. The event was packed with city officials, press, and more than a few faces from my past. Standing in the bustling lobby, watching my team handle everything with confidence, I felt a rush of pride. I'd rebuilt what was lost. I'd done it my way. But the biggest change wasn't in the company. It was in the family I was finally starting to trust again. The summer after the Art Center opening, Seattle was filled with sunlight and restless energy. It had been over a year since I returned, and the company felt alive again, contracts rolling in, new uniforms in the closet, radios chirping with good news instead of emergencies. Linda, meanwhile, faded further into the background. She showed up for the occasional board meeting but mostly kept to her own circle, never truly accepting that Parker and Associates had become my company in spirit and fact. Her focus shifted to travel, yoga retreats in California, and luncheons with friends, leaving Madison and me to run the business. One evening, after a long day of interviews, Madison stopped by my office. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, something she picked up from me, and hesitated at the doorway. "You look like you could use this," as she said, placing the mug beside my laptop. I smiled, grateful. "You, too. Sit down." She settled into the guest chair, fidgeting with her bracelet. "I've been thinking a lot about the company. About Dad. And you." I waited, letting her find her words. "I used to think you were trying to take everything away from me and Mom," as she said softly. "I didn't get how much you gave up for this company. How much you gave up for Dad." I stared at her, surprised. It wasn't about taking anything from anyone. I just wanted to build something that lasted. Something Dad would be proud of. She looked away, blinking fast. "I know that now. I see it every day. Honestly, I don't think I even deserved the house, let alone the company. Not at first." There was a long pause. The city lights shimmered outside my window, the hum of traffic like a distant river. "I appreciate you saying that, Madison," I finally replied. "But you worked for this. You earned respect, the hard way." She smiled, shy and genuine, a far cry from the girl who once treated the family business like a burden. "I guess we both had to grow up. In different ways." That night, after Madison left, I walked through the empty halls of the office building, thinking about Dad. His photo still hung by the elevator, Dad in his security uniform, one arm around me, the other around a very young Madison, all of us grinning into the camera. I remembered the nights he'd spend teaching me how to read blueprints or schedule shifts, the afternoons at the lake house where Mom would paint, and would swim in the cold, green water until the sun set. Those memories stung, but in a bittersweet way, as if I was finally ready to move forward. 6 months later, Madison called me into her office, a modest room decorated with sticky notes and color-coded charts. She looked nervous. "I have something for you," she said, her voice trembling. On her desk lay a set of official documents, the blue folder crisp and new. "I want you to have the lake house. All of it. The deed is in your name now." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The last time I'd set foot in that house, I was a teenager with no voice and no power, forced to watch Linda redecorate, remove every trace of my mother, and lock away our family's history. "Why?" I asked softly. Madison took a deep breath. "Because it's always been yours. It was wrong for us to keep it. You gave me a second chance here. You never had to. I want to do the same for you." I sat down, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. The bitterness I'd held onto for so long started to dissolve, replaced by something lighter, almost hopeful. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it," a Madison replied. "Say you'll make it feel like home again." I nodded, my eyes stinging with tears I hadn't allowed myself in years. "Thank you, Maddie. I promise, I will." I spent that weekend driving north up the winding highway, out of the city and into the trees, until the Pacific came into view and the road dipped toward Whidbey Island. The house was still there, weathered, sun-bleached, but standing. The porch sagged a little, the garden was overgrown, but the bones of my childhood remained. I stepped inside and was hit by the familiar scent of cedar and ocean air. On the wall, under years of dust, was one of Mom's faded watercolors, a heron standing in the surf. I stood in that living room for a long time, letting all the years rush over me. I called a contractor, ordered fresh paint, and started cleaning out the closets. Every day after work, I drove out to the island, scrubbing floors, hanging new curtains, and, finally, unpacking Mom's old art supplies. I found her favorite brushes, brittle now, but still stained with color. Slowly, I brought the house back to life. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Madison would come by, bringing groceries or takeout, and would sit on the porch talking about everything and nothing. Our wounds weren't gone, but they were healing. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the water, Madison turned to me and said, "Dad would have loved to see this. He'd be proud, Emily, of you, of the company, of us." I believed her. By fall, Parker and Associates was the strongest it had been in years. We'd landed a contract with the city to provide security for a major international event. The press called it a comeback. But I knew it was more than that. It was a new beginning, for the business, for the family, and for me. And for the first time since I was 12, I felt at home. Winter rolled over Whidbey Island, bringing fog and the sharp scent of pine trees. Most days, I woke to gulls calling over the Pacific and the soft creak of the old house settling in the wind. The lake house was mine now, not because I fought for it in a lawyer's office, or because I schemed and plotted, but because Madison finally understood what it meant to me. The gift felt bigger than just property. It was a piece of my history restored, a chapter reopened with hope. I balanced my time between the company and the house. My mornings were spent reviewing proposals, meeting city officials, and leading training sessions at Parker and Associates. I walked the halls with the quiet confidence of someone who knew every corner, every faded photo on the wall. My badge, my years on patrol, none of it ever really left me. I brought those lessons to every client, every negotiation. People didn't just trust our alarms or cameras, they trusted me. but my evenings were reserved for the lake house. I took to painting, just as Mum had, sitting on the wraparound porch with a hot mug of tea, sketching the way the clouds moved over the water or the way the trees bent in the wind. I found an old trunk of Mum's sketchbooks, yellowed and fragile, each page alive with memories. I let myself miss her, sometimes out loud, whispering stories to the empty rooms. Madison visited often, sometimes staying overnight on weekends. We developed a new rhythm. She'd bring a bottle of wine, I'd make dinner, and would laugh over memories, old and new. She was different now, less sure of herself but somehow kinder. She confessed she liked working for the company more than she'd ever liked owning it. She liked learning, contributing, building something real. I saw her strengths where Linda never had, and she started to trust my praise. We talked about Dad a lot, his corny jokes, his unwavering belief that anything could be fixed with duct tape, his hope that someday Madison and I would be more than just reluctant sisters. It was strange how grief could bring people together when nothing else could. Linda, on the other hand, drifted farther away with each passing month. She rarely called, rarely visited the office, and when she did, it was only for official business. I heard she'd bought a condo in Palm Springs, where the sun always shone and her sister lived close by. Madison kept in touch with her out of duty, but even she admitted that things had changed forever. The company thrived. Word spread quickly in Seattle. Parker and Associates was back, under tough, honest leadership. Clients called asking for me by name, some remembering me as the patrol cop who used to walk their block, others just recognizing someone who kept their word. I built a new training program for our team, focusing on empathy, quick thinking, and community service. We hired veterans, single parents, people who needed a second chance, just like Dad always wanted. By spring, I'd rehired almost everyone Linda had laid off, and then some. Our headquarters was buzzing again, the break room filled with laughter, the conference room calendar booked months out. We were growing, new contracts, bigger projects, and, for the first time, enough money to renovate our offices. One day, Madison burst into my office, her cheeks pink with excitement. "Emily, you have to see the news. Parker and Associates is nominated for Business of the Year. The city's honoring us for our work with at-risk youth." I felt my throat tighten, pride and humility tangling together. That would have been over the moon. "I wish he could see it," a Madison whispered. "He does," I said quietly, looking at Mom's watercolor on the wall. "He always does." For the company party that spring, I invited everyone to the lake house. The weather held, blue sky, crisp air, the kind of afternoon that made you believe in fresh starts. Our whole staff showed up, bringing families and stories. I grilled burgers on the old patio. Madison organized lawn games. There was music, laughter, and for the first time, no tension, no Linda, no old resentments, just people who cared about each other. Late that evening, when the last guests drove off and the porch lights glowed warm in the dusk, Madison and I sat together in comfortable silence. "I used to think you were just lucky, or stubborn, or both," a Madison said softly. "Now I know you're just strong. And maybe that's what I always wanted to be." "You already are," I said. "You just needed the space to find it." We watched the moon rise over the water, feeling the pull of something larger than either of us: family, forgiveness, and a new beginning. That summer, I officially gave Madison a new title: Director of Community Relations. She'd earned it, and I made sure the staff knew it. Her energy brought in a new wave of clients and partners. Our company wasn't just a business anymore, it was a community. And I saw her pride growing day by day as she mentored younger employees and led workshops across the city. As for me, I still split my time. Some evenings I worked late, poring over contracts or emergency plans, and some nights I let myself just be a daughter, a sister, a woman sitting on her childhood porch, dreaming new dreams. The past would always be a part of me. But for the first time, I wasn't running from it or fighting to prove something. I was building forward, one call, one brushstroke, one family dinner at a time. Summer on Whidbey Island always carried a kind of magic, mornings cloaked in fog, afternoons warm with sunlight, and the evenings bursting with the sound of crickets and the glow of fireflies along the porch. My life had settled into a new rhythm, balancing security briefings, city contracts, and, in the quiet hours, restoring both my family's lake house and the memories it held. Parker and Associates was no longer just surviving, we were thriving. Our work with at-risk youth earned headlines and heartfelt thank yous from parents who never thought anyone would give their kids a real shot. I started a scholarship fund in Dad's name, and Madison, now a full-time director, helped turn our company into a place where people came not just for a job, but for a second chance. I loved the work, but even more, I loved what the work was becoming, a way to heal, to give, to build something bigger than any one of us. That July, the city invited us to provide security for the annual Seattle Arts and Culture Festival. It was the most high-profile event we'd ever landed, a 3-day celebration on the waterfront, with thousands of visitors, local vendors, and live music from sunrise to midnight. The press called us as Seattle's guardians. Ira and I could see the pride in my team's eyes as we patrolled the festival together. On opening day, Madison stood beside me in her staff t-shirt and clipboard, scanning the crowd. "Think Dad would believe this?" Ishi asked, grinning. "I think he'd say, 'Of course you pulled it off, Em. You're a Parker.'" I nudged her. "And a king, don't forget." We laughed, and for once, I felt none of the old awkwardness. We were sisters now in truth, not just in lore. That night, as fireworks exploded over Elliott Bay, Madison and I sat on the hood of my cruiser, sharing a funnel cake and trading stories about the company's rougher days. Staff wandered by, waving and calling out thanks, and I realized how much our little firm had changed, not just in size or reputation, but in spirit. The festival ended with rave reviews, and our inbox overflowed with new business requests. The mayor called personally to thank me, and the chief of police stopped by with a commendation for community leadership. I hung the award on the office wall next to Dad's photo and Mom's watercolor. Yet, even with all the success, my favorite moments were still the quiet ones. Sunday mornings at the lake house, painting on the porch, or walking the trails with Madison and our rescue dog, Lunar. Sometimes, after dinner, we'd sit under the stars, sharing secrets and dreams, letting the old wounds heal in the safety of our laughter. But not everything was easy. That fall, Linda sent a letter, her first in over a year. She'd sold her condo in Palm Springs and was moving to Arizona to be closer to her sister. The letter was formal, almost cold, but at the bottom she wrote, in shaky handwriting, a take care of Madison. "I know she needs you more than she'll ever say." Madison read the letter in silence, then handed it back to me. "It's weird," Ishi said. "I'm not even sad. I think I'm relieved." She made her choice, I replied softly. We didn't talk about Linda again. Instead, we poured ourselves into the future. The city contract led to more opportunities, including a partnership with local schools. Madison spearheaded a mentorship program for girls interested in law enforcement and security work, and I found myself speaking to high schoolers about what it really means to serve your community, not for applause, but because you care. Those talks became a kind of therapy for me, a way to honor Mom's empathy and Dad's work ethic. I saw myself in the bright, stubborn girls at the back of the classroom, the ones who asked tough questions and didn't take easy answers. I told them about standing up for yourself, about surviving setbacks, about building something no one can take away from you, not even family. Meanwhile, the lake house blossomed. I painted the porch rails robin's egg blue, just like Mom had done. Madison and I replanted the garden with lavender and wildflowers. Sometimes we hosted the company's staff meetings out there, everyone squeezed onto the porch with notepads and lemonade. On one of those afternoons, as the team laughed and made plans for the next big contract, Madison caught my eye. "You know, this place feels different now," she said. "How so?" "It feels like possibility. Like we're finally writing our own story." I knew what she meant. For years, the house had felt haunted by loss, by what was taken, what was never said, what was never forgiven. Now, it felt like a home again. That night, after everyone had left, I stood alone on the porch, breathing in the scent of lavender and salt air. The moon cast silver over the water, and for a moment, I thought I could hear Mom humming from the kitchen, Dad's laugh echoing down the hall. I realized then, legacy isn't just what you inherit. It's what you build, what you share, and what you choose to let go. Autumn on Whidbey Island felt like an exhale after a long, hot summer. The maples blazed with gold and scarlet, and every sunset seemed to linger a little longer. Work at Parker and Associates was busier than ever, but there was a different energy now, a sense of calm, of being rooted, even as the world hurried by. That year, the company won the bid to provide security for the state's biggest tech conference. It was an enormous responsibility, and for the first time, I let Madison take the lead on logistics. She surprised everyone, including herself, with how smoothly she ran things. I watched from a distance as she coordinated teams, solved problems on the fly, and charmed even the most demanding clients. She had finally stepped into her own strength. One chilly Friday night after the conference wrapped, Madison and I sat on the porch, mugs of cider warming our hands. I was terrified, as she admitted, but it actually went okay. Maybe even, or good. It went great, I said, pride swelling in my chest. "You're really good at this, Maddie." She grinned, a little embarrassed. I never thought I'd say this, but I actually love the work. Not because of Dad, not because I had to. Just because it's mine now, too. We let the silence stretch, both of us thinking about how far we'd come. I glanced inside the living room where Mom's old watercolors hung beside my own, the family's story written in color and memory. The following week, a letter arrived at the lake house. It was from the attorney who'd handled Dad's estate, the same grey-haired man who'd read the will so many years ago. Inside was a smaller envelope, marked in my mother's handwriting. My breath caught. Madison watched as I opened it, both of us silent. The letter was simple. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means you found your way home, in every sense of the word. This house was always meant for you, not because of bricks or paint, but because of the heart you put into it. Remember, your real inheritance isn't a place or a business. It's the strength to stand tall when others try to shrink you. It's the courage to love, even after heartbreak. I hope you find happiness here, and that you fill these rooms with laughter and purpose. With all my love. Mom. I read it twice, tears slipping down my cheeks. Madison squeezed my hand, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. That evening, I gathered the staff at the house for a small celebration, not just for the tech contract, but for everything we'd survived. I stood in the kitchen, cider steaming in the slow cooker, while laughter and music drifted through every open window. During dinner, I gave a short speech, sharing the words from Mum's letter without explaining how I'd gotten them. Our greatest inheritance, I told them, isn't what we're given. It's what we choose to build, together. Thank you for helping me make this house, this company, a place worth coming home to. There were cheers, toasts, and more than a few happy tears. Even some of our toughest guards got misty-eyed, and Madison pretended not to wipe her cheeks with her napkin. When the night ended and the last guest had gone, I wandered through the house, touching the walls, feeling the memories settle in around me. For years, I'd fought to prove myself, first as Dad's daughter, then as a cop, then as a business owner and sister. I'd measured my worth in effort and resilience, thinking that survival was all that mattered. Now, I saw things differently. Strength meant opening the door to forgiveness. It meant letting people in, trusting that love wouldn't always leave you behind. It meant choosing joy, even after loss. The next morning, Madison and I walked the beach at sunrise. The waves were calm, the air crisp with the scent of salt and seaweed. She stopped, skimming a stone out over the water. "Do you ever think about leaving it all behind?" she asked suddenly. I considered the question, searching my heart. I used to. When things were hard, I wanted to run. Now, not so much. I gestured at the house, the shoreline, the sky. This feels like coming home, finally. I don't need to run anymore. Madison nodded, content. Me neither. A week later, our mentorship program for girls kicked off at a local high school. The auditorium buzzed with energy as we spoke to 100 teenagers about courage, leadership, and building your own legacy. I watched Madison stand at the podium, speaking about mistakes, fresh starts, and the power of believing in yourself. That night, back at the lake house, I found a note tucked under my door, written in looping, uncertain handwriting. Emily, thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't. I don't say it enough, but you changed my life. I'm proud to be your sister. Madison. I smiled, feeling the last pieces of old pain fall away. As autumn faded into winter, the lake house became a place for gatherings, laughter, and new memories. Our company was stronger than ever, and my heart was finally at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because I'd learned how to find beauty in the imperfect. I was home. Winter settled gently over Whidbey Island, blanketing the lake house in quiet, and turning the mornings to shimmering silver. Most days, I started with coffee on the porch, bundled in my mother's old sweater, listening to the soft tap of rain on the roof. The water stretched out calm and grey, the shoreline lined with driftwood and the last faded blooms of autumn. Inside, the house felt warm again, not just from the fire in the hearth, but from the voices and laughter that filled every room. Madison had taken to inviting friends from work over for Sunday dinners. Sometimes, the old team from Parker and Associates would show up with spouses and kids in tow. The kitchen bustled with life, pots simmering, music drifting from the speakers, and conversations that looped from business to childhood stories and back again. Each corner of the house became layered with new memories. The den was now a library, lined with Dad's old detective novels and company mementos. The sunroom, where Mom once painted, became my favorite space: easels, canvases, and light spilling through the windows. On the wall above the mantel, I hung her watercolors next to some of my own, a quiet dialogue between mother and daughter that nobody else had to understand. Through it all, Parker and Associates kept growing. The company's reputation for compassion, integrity, and resilience spread beyond Seattle. We started winning contracts in other states, partnering with nonprofits, training veterans, and helping young women find careers in law enforcement. Our scholarship fund expanded, sending a new wave of students to college every year. Sometimes, I caught myself thinking back to that day in the lawyer's office when Linda tried to erase me from Dad's legacy. It felt like another life, a life that belonged to someone weaker, someone still searching for a sense of home. I no longer needed their approval, or even their acknowledgement. I had something better, the knowledge that I had rebuilt, not just what was lost, but something stronger, more enduring. Linda never returned to Seattle. Word reached us that she'd remarried quietly in Arizona, settling into a new life far from our world. Madison heard from her on holidays, polite but distant. There was no anger left, only a kind of gentle acceptance, like the last leaves falling from the trees. Every so often, I'd walk the beach at sunset, Lunar the rescue dog bounding ahead, chasing gulls and barking at the wind. I'd breathe in the scent of salt and wood smoke, listening to the hush of the tide. Those walks became a meditation on gratitude, forgiveness, and all the ways we find our place in the world. On the anniversary of Dad's passing, Madison and I invited the whole company team and their families to the house for a celebration of life. There were speeches, tears, and laughter. We planted a new maple by the driveway, a living symbol of roots and renewal. As dusk settled, I stood on the porch, watching the lights flicker on one by one, voices drifting up from the lawn. I felt the ache of loss and the glow of fulfillment woven together, proof that the past, however painful, could lead to something beautiful. After everyone left, Madison found me in the kitchen, staring out at the stars. "You okay?" Ishi asked softly. "I am," I replied. "For the first time in a long time, I really am." She leaned against the counter, smiling. "You know, I think Mom and Dad will be proud of us." "I hope so," I said. "But more than that, I'm proud of us." We stood in comfortable silence, the weight of old wounds finally gone. That night, as I got ready for bed, I noticed the familiar scent of lavender soap, a whisper of my mother lingering in the air. I smiled, knowing she would have loved the irony, that the girl once pushed out of her own home became the one to save everything that truly mattered. I crawled into bed, listening to the rain, and thought about legacy. Not the kind you inherit in a bank account or in the lines of a will, but the kind you build one day, one choice at a time. The kind that is measured in the people you help, the laughter you share, the hope you offer when others have none. Maybe the best revenge isn't triumph or vindication, but the quiet refusal to shrink. Maybe it's the courage to grow, to love, to rebuild, until the world looks a little more like the place you always dreamed of. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's coming home to a place that was always meant for you.